For those of you who are working from home, have you ever wondered whether it's worth having a space outside of the home from which to operate? So today we're going to talk about the advantage and disadvantage of working from home versus from an outside business place. There are obvious advantages to working from home, and just to let you know, I started working from home. So for the first 5 years I was in operation, I operated from my basement and eventually grew out of the basement and moved into an office. So I've lived both experiences, the office outside the home and one inside the home. So I'm going to share with you some of the advantages for you to just consider when trying to make a decision, should I move out of my basement, so to speak, and into a more designated business place, or continue working from home. So some of the advantages of working from home, the biggest advantage without a doubt is the cost saving. So basically, if you're not paying any rent, obviously there's a tremendous cost saving, and that's probably the most obvious reason for working out of home, and I'm not teaching anybody anything new here. The other advantage of working from home is the ability to deduct part of your home. So as most of you know, if you operate from your home, you are allowed, from a tax perspective, deduct part of your property taxes, interest, utilities, repairs, and all of those costs related to your home. So that, of course, is very attractive to use it as a mechanism to reduce your taxable income. Another advantage, of course, that you've probably picked up on is the convenience, because it's right there, there's no travel time, and you're right at your business from the moment you get up in the morning. So obviously there's some savings by way of time, for there's no travel time, no travel costs, and of course those are things that you probably thought about. And another advantage that I found when I was working out of home that became less attractive when I moved out is just the availability to work for half an hour. And because I've always had the intentions of having my computer and all my equipment at the office and not bringing it home with me, it made it easy for me to say if I want to work an extra half hour, because everything that I had business related was in my basement. It allowed me to put in an extra half hour after dinner or whenever during the day without having to travel to the office, do my half hour and travel back, which of course I no longer do if I'm working out of the home. So a few disadvantages that you may not have thought of or may have. One of the disadvantages of working out of your house or in your basement or wherever you're operating from is you never truly have an opportunity to get away from work. And that is one thing that I remembered was kind of nice when I moved out of my home into an outside office. Because when I was renting, or rather when I was working out of my basement, every time I go in the basement, I would see the work that needed to get done, and I was tempted to get pulled into my workload. And sometimes the problems that I had related to my work followed me home, obviously, because home was where my office was. So making a cut between home and work was a bit more difficult, despite the fact that the work was mostly in the basement. But every time I did go in the basement just to get a can of soup, I passed by my office, and therefore resulted in me reminded of the work that I needed to get done and all of the problems related to work. The other thing that I appreciated in moving out of my home with my office was the phone. So I had a separate phone line for my business. And so even if the phone was in the basement and not necessarily ringing at home per se, I could always hear it. And it's hard to resist the temptation of picking up that phone when you hear it ringing. Whereas if I'm working in an office that's outside of my house, well, I don't hear the phone ringing, so I don't have that temptation to go run and answer the phone. That's not business. I talked about the convenience a few seconds ago of being able to put in extra time as an advantage of operating from home, but that is also a disadvantage. I also found that when I was working out of my basement, is that the temptation, although good at times because it allowed me to put in an extra half hour with little time lost in traveling to and from the office, it sometimes made it too easy and made the segregation between office and home a bit more difficult. And so I think it can add strain onto the marriage or onto family life because our definition or our way of separating the two might be more difficult if your business is being operated out of home. And of course, the other advantage that I remembered was just having that lack of privacy.
So how are you feeling about the new company?
I feel good. Wow.
You excited about the new company?
Yeah, I'm excited to start the company.
After breakfast.
We did that. So what's next?
There were days where I wanted to take a day off or two, and especially in our case where our shower was in the basement, it was kind of awkward to travel through the reception area and through the office in my house coat to go take a shower while the employees were hard at work. So obviously, there's the lack of privacy, and especially if you have employees who are working out of your home, then you truly never get the full privacy. And it makes it to maybe that's a good thing, but you can't have a really good fight with your spouse while people are working out of your basement. So those are all things that I found was very restrictive in having my business being operated out of my home, especially once I started having employees working out of the home as well. So now to talk about the advantages of moving your home office into an outside space. One of the things that I really appreciated about moving my business out of my home, other than the fact that I had regained much more privacy and all that we talked about, was the fact that it was easier to separate my personal life from my business life, because there was now a clear segregation. And I found sometimes just even the walk home, because my office has always been very close to home, and even when I moved a little bit farther away, the drive home or the walk home gave me a 5 to 10 minutes time lapse between home and office that allowed me to disconnect and arrive home a little bit better separated from work. So that is something I never saw the value until I actually moved out of the house, how I needed a few minutes to just disconnect, and it allowed me to be more present at home once I got home by having moved out of the office. And now we're going to get into some of the things that I think are even bigger advantages. And one of those things that I noticed immediately as soon as I established my office outside of home was the client perception. It is quite noticeable that clients were more comfortable in meeting me and seeing me in an office that was not out of my home or my personal residence. So the perception, how clients felt at ease, and how the whole thing felt and looked more professional once I moved out, I have no doubt had a major impact on how clients perceived me, how they perceived the value of my services, and how at ease they were in dealing with me. But the other thing I also noticed is the number of referrals that came out of that. I have no doubt that the number of referrals I got increased dramatically once I moved out of the office. And I think part of that has to do with how at ease people were in referring someone who operated at a rented space versus working out of their own homes. And then after I moved out, I realized myself that I felt more at ease in referring people to a business that was working out of an office that was outside of home than referring them to a place that was working out of their basement. And there was a certain pride in me knowing that I was dealing with someone that had an established business outside of home than dealing with someone that was working out of the basement. So the whole perception part, I think, had a bigger impact than I ever imagined until I moved out, because I did notice a tremendous increase in the amount of referrals I got. And I think a lot of that came with just how at ease they were now in being in the office, and how comfortable they were in referring their friends to come and see me in a more professional environment. And finally, the other thing that I think will impact or has impacted a business is at the time of resale, I am pretty convinced that you would get more for your business if you already operated in the space that's outside of your home. Now, of course, that'll depend on what kind of business you have. If you have a plumbing business and most of your business is done on location, then whether you answer the phone from home or another office probably won't matter much. But if you do have a business where you are meeting with clients and not necessarily always at their place of location, I think then that will also influence the difference in whether or not you should consider having your house in office or an outside office or out of your home. So then, now that you've seen the advantage and disadvantage, you're probably asking yourself, well, how do I make the decision? So for those of you who are operating from your basement are probably saying, okay, I've got the pros and cons, but I'm still not too sure how to make the decision on whether I should move out or not. It's not an easy decision, but if we can get to a point where working out of an office that's outside of your home result in the same net income, then the whole process of moving out becomes a lot easier, because we've just talked about some of the less tangible advantage of being outside of your home, such as more privacy, more cut from your work and all of that. But the problem that we often have is we have to make it up in dollars and cents for it to really make sense. But what I found in my business is when I moved out, because of the extra referrals and the extra business that I picked up, I also did the math of what I would need to bring in, financially speaking, for me to make up for it. Now, keeping in mind, the year I moved out of my home was in the 1995, if I remember correctly, 1996. So back then, rent was considerably less, but then the values of the services were also less. But back then, I was paying like $6,000 a year for my rent. A small space, mind you, but it wasn't a whole lot of money. So all I needed to do was justify getting an extra $6,000 in net income to justify the move out. And so what I did, I just worked the numbers backwards. If I figured if I needed an extra $6,000 of net income, I did the math and figured I needed $12,000 of revenues, which would result in $6,000 of profit to pay for my rent. So by the same token, in today's world, if you're gonna find that moving out will cost you an extra $30,000 in rent, and your profit margins is, say, 50%, then needless to say that you need to gain an extra $60,000 of revenues to pay for that space, for that rented space. But you may find that depending on where you're situated, if your office is sitting on a street with lots of traffic and you have reasonable signage, you may find that that extra $60,000 of revenues will come very quickly and easily just because of the increased visibility. Never mind the people referring you more, and never mind clients feel more at ease in seeing you. So you may find that an extra $60,000 you'll be able to make up fairly quickly. And the other thing that I also noticed by moving out, it became easier for me to increase my fees by 10, 15, 20% across the board. So that also allowed me to recuperate what I was paying in rent in very little time. And before I share with you one last advantage of having your business outside of your home, I would really like you to subscribe to our channel, and also if you like this video, to press the like button. And so hopefully we'll get more and more of these videos out your way. So now let's go to the last segment of this presentation, and not the least important, but something worth considering is that if you are working out of your home, you will usually not be allowed to have signage of any kind to demonstrate your business. So not only do people may have a harder time finding you, but you cannot be put on Google Maps per se. So once you have a business that's outside of your home, that allows you now to put a signage up. And that sign will also allow you to have a Google Maps presence and therefore allow people to provide reviews on your business. And we've covered that a little bit in our marketing segment, but we're going to cover it again as to how to better use social media. But I think it's critical for any business to have positive reviews on your business, which is not possible if you're operating out of your home, or far more difficult to do so. So I hope this video helped you a little bit in making that decision. And like I said, there's no right or wrong decision, but I think it's something you need to consider and think about. I know for me, that was a very difficult decision. It was probably one of the more important decisions, a more difficult decision in growing my business, as to moving out and deciding when and how I was going to do that. But I hope this video possibly put a few things in context and allowed you to make that decision a little bit easier as to whether you're going to continue operating from home or move into an office environment. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and just keeping in mind, always remember to work on your business more than you do in your business, and to always make every day count. In other words, take a look at your day and make sure everything you do has a good purpose.